The top 25 starting pitchers aged 25 and under are getting covered tonight, plus hot news, plus spring training stats that do and don't matter. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Jackson Jobe that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. It's Tyler Childs, joined as always by Robbie Baseball from Montana. What's happening, Robbie?
Yeah, I do have a plaid shirt on tonight too, with the truck behind me. Ty, big truck news update. Thanks for asking. Last night after 7 p.m., I went out to the shop and I'm like, what's going on? I rebuilt the carburetor over the weekend. Very exciting. But it was bogging down when I put it into drive, only to find out that like the carburetor's got an extra set of jets and there's fuel and air and spark. And those are the things you need to drive. So anyway, no one cares. I figured out that these microscopically small little air vents in the top of the carburetor, probably, even though I cleaned it, probably still had like a tiny piece of debris. So I shoved some penetrating fluid down it, made sure it went through, fired her up, put her in gear, drove it. Oh, so exciting. Now I only went like 50 meters from my shop into my garage because I wanted to do the electrical work and stuff, but it just felt real good. Real good.
I'm excited for you.
Thank you. I'm glad you're still awake. How are you? Anything as exciting as that?
I mean, yeah.
Wait, what?
The bar is not really high. No, I mean, we got World Baseball Classic. I think, I'll say this. The round robin games of the Baseball Classic are a snore. Like, they absolutely suck. Now, the North American pool wasn't terrible, but it will always suck until they do what soccer does and they just randomly scatter teams. You can't have this regional thing. That has to go away, or this event will never be good. So that's the last piece of the puzzle. It's working out. You're getting USA Japan in the final tonight, but it still has been a bit of a snore in terms of baseball quality up until now. So spring training has been far more interesting, and we know how I feel about spring training. So there's just a lot going on right now. This is one of my favorite times of the year. We're in draft season, spring training. We're 9 days away, Robbie. You'll appreciate this. I saw it on Sportsnet today. John Olerud number of days away from opening day.
Oh, nice. 9 days out.
Numero 9. So
yeah,
we're talking pitching tonight, and taking some risks. That's what drafting pitching is all about. So I think in order to have that courage to do it, we're going to need a little liquid.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Oh, I just tried to move my camera to set my thing up to show, but I forgot that because I got the background, it just hides it all. So anyway, I got some work to do on mine tonight, Ty. We got that, and then I got this.
Back onto the crowd float here.
Just wait for it. Oh, it does make a noise. Okay, spinning the top off, and then spinning the top off. I'm busy. I'm going to be busy. Okay, are you ready?
Root an umbrella in here, or what's going on here?
Almost. So you take a shot of OJ, maybe 2. Let's say 2 shots OJ. Take a shot of Amaretto, or I've got specifically Di Serrano, and you take the light beer of your choice. All right.
Oh, this is that one you sent me.
Yeah, it is. This, my friend, is called.
Shout out to the Wisconsin people listening.
This is called the lunchbox. It's your amaretto,
Okay.
your light beer of choice, and OJ.
Well, and I'm gonna put you on the spot. You have to hammer it. That's the drink.
No,
Yeah,
because I've had a couple of these before. I dipped in Sunday, and I kind of forgot about the fact that amaretto's got that extra punch to it. So I had a bit of a rough Monday on account of my Sunday indulgence before and after hockey. So I won't slam her back, but I'll drink this one pretty quick. I am ready to go with 2 tonight. So what are you indulging in?
I've got a Woodford going, so we're gonna ride this one for a little bit because when I cracked it open for the last episode, it felt right. It tasted delicious, and I'm probably gonna ride this train out until that bottle hits the old tank empty.
Makes sense. So tonight we are going to cover, just so everyone knows, some hot news. At the end, we'll do the spring training stats because, hey, why not? Ty, he loves his spring training stats. Let's give it to him. And plus, I've got one pitcher that I am excited to mention yet again. And the meat of this podcast tonight is going to be discussing Ty's list, my list of our top 25 dynasty pitchers, and we can kind of discuss in a minute exactly how we got to form our list, what we were focusing on. But before we get to all that, Ty, I've got a very important question to ask you.
Let's hear it.
What do you call an alligator that solves crimes?
An investigator.
Oh, son of a bitch. Okay.
That one was too easy.
I got to come back. Yeah, I was going to say that my kid didn't quite get it. But that's all right. I forgot to mention this last time. So I bought a can crusher for beer cans, just the one you stick to the wall. And so kid's new nickname is Crusher. And all the beer cans that have been collecting down here that I moved out of the room all went out to the garage. He got to pick the spot on the wall. I put it up, and he has filled up a pretty big garbage can halfway full with empties from there. And then we went out to the shop and found some more. And then the best news is that he's like, Dad, you got to drink more beer so I can crush more cans. And I said, son, I will not let you down.
Oh, geez. All right. So now that we're through the good stuff here, don't forget at Dinger's Pod, hit us up with fancy questions all season long. You can get Robbie at Robbie Baseball under me at Attorney Boss. And let's get hot news, Robbie. Let's kick into it. We spent a lot of time this offseason talking about Nolan Jones, right? And when the trade happened, it was a near lock for Nolan Jones to be on the Rockies. And then they just started like playing out the fantasy of one man's garbage is another man's treasure, and just collecting like depth guys from other organizations to put together what is a terrible team. It's going to be really interesting. Like, I don't know what it is they're trying to accomplish, but I will say this. I do think it is the best thing for Nolan Jones to go down. I don't think he's ready to make that leap based on how spring went, some poor at-bats.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think the spring is the reason he's not there. And I think that's also in part why Jurickson Profar signed a 1-year, $7 million deal with Colorado this late in camp, because they were looking at themselves and thinking, okay, so, Rogers is gone for a long time. We can move McMahon over, but Jones is not getting it done. And what's that? Elizers, whatever, Montero, the other kind of bench option third baseman, he doesn't look like he's going to be a proper starting third baseman for them. And this was the safety net that Colorado had because of the moves you talked about of not going out and getting some of the like 3 to 4, like Harold Castro as the guy that you go get to kind of balance things out, your worst case scenario in spring training. Well, he was going to end up being a starter, and that is not okay if you want to be competitive.
Well, I think what you have here is you have enough time to give Charlie Blackmon some runway so that you can get rid of him, right? Like, that's going to happen this season, I think. If it doesn't, he's just going to retire at the end of the year.
They've just been so bad at trading players. Like, I'd love for that to be right. I'd love for Blackmon to go somewhere that he can like try to be competitive. Like, send him to, I don't know if he'd want to be like stay in the NL West or not, but send him to a team where he can be on a legitimate contender so that he's got an opportunity, because he's been an amazing fantasy player for, years and years, and a great baseball player for years and years. Let him go somewhere to try to win now. That's fair.
He's gonna be a Yankee. It's just too obvious. Like, put him in right field. Like, get Stanton out of the outfield. Like it just for me is a too obvious of a fit. Short porch and right. I see that one happening. He fits the Yankees mold of bringing in vets. Like they do it over and over again. So
Good point,
I
yep.
see that one being plausible. And the Rockies will literally take anybody. So it's a perfect trade partner for the Yankees.
Yeah.
So I could see that one happening. So we talked Profar. Edwin Diaz, obviously devastating news for any Edwin Diaz owners. Like I know that, we just finished up the Surf League. Diaz was the first reliever off the board, right? Awful.
Like second round, I think, too. Like a top 30 pick, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the risk with pitching, though, right? We're going to talk a lot about that tonight, like talking risk in pitching, short-term, long-term. But there's risk at every position, right? I mean, it can happen. We've got guys, speaking of, Jose Altuve got hit with a fastball by Colorado Rocky closer, Mr. Daniel Bard. And then Carson Kelly's got a broken arm. So great for any Gabriel Moreno owners, which I got kind of beaked for drafting him too early in that same Surf League. Looking pretty good right now. But, there's lots of these things out there. They happen. There's not a lot we can do. Austin Nola got hit in the head. Maybe it'll be like Rookie of the Year when he falls on his arm and all of a sudden gets a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. Nola will be like, I can hit off speed again? What happened here?
No, Nola just is constantly hurt, and this is just another example of him potentially having another setback, and everybody wants him to be the starting catcher in San Diego, and it just like frustratingly looks like this could potentially be another hurdle for him to even just be eased in. It could be one of those 7-day concussion protocol. We'll see what the Padres want to do for opening week and all that, but it's unfortunate.
I think they're happy to run Capasano out because he doesn't really hurt you defensively. He's not a bad defensive catcher, and his offensive upside is way higher than Nola's. So he hasn't shown it, obviously, in the pros. His pro exposure has been pretty poor, but there's definitely upside there.
He was one of those low level, I don't know the right word here, but it's a low level, cornerstone looking player. And then as he came up the ranks, everything kind of shrunk a little bit on the, the high end intensity, like the ceiling kind of lowered at each level that he got up to. And he's not been able to make it work at the MLB level. Doesn't mean he can't do it now, but he's still young also. But just, Campusano, I can't think is the honest answer for San Diego right now when they're in that all-in position. But Nola has never had a full season either. So,
but I mean, he hit 14 bombs last year in 358 at bats in AAA, right? Like that's not nothing. So 20 bombs out of the catcher position is well above average, right? So that's kind of what you're looking at, and I think they're going to give him a shot. Like he didn't do much. He hit 250 in a really small cup of coffee last year. But like his career minor league average is 301. So, there's enough here on the offensive side, even if there's a turn down from that, which I think is reasonable to expect. But I still think it's a better option for the way the Padres are built offensively than the maybe incremental benefit you get defensively from Nola. Right? So I think that's an interesting spot. Man, you just went straight from like Montana, like on the plains into like the ranch. No, that was like the ranch. You got the stone fireplace. You're just a classy rancher with the baby the baby.
Not my place. No, I was just trying to get the background. I kept flashing the chef jacket over my shoulder. Keeps flashing. So the final bit of like pretty sad news for fantasy folks out there, myself included. Atlanta's second baseman no more. Vaughn Grissom's demoted. There was talk that we all ignored. Don't pretend you didn't. That he was not really good defensively and that Atlanta didn't necessarily want him there. Whether this is a temporary move for something else to happen over the next 7-10 days, whatever it's going to be, I don't know. But if you're demoting him now after letting him play like well over, whatever his at bats were last year, under 150, right? Whatever our home league thing is, he was just under that. This is very unfortunate. And for anybody who's out there in contracts leagues who's like, oh no, the clock's starting to go on Grissom and he's in the minors for me because last year was his rookie year and that's now over. Well, go try to acquire him because the battle play eventually in Atlanta. It's a matter of how they're going to fit him in. But it's also a testament to Atlanta not just saying we're going to go with all the bats here. We're going to, we want Vaughn to actually play the position. And once upon a time, there was a player who it's going to scare a lot of fantasy owners out there that I can kind of say is a similar type of player, and that's Devin Travis, who was a former Blue Jay. Also, I don't know if he was an all-star, but he was one of those cusp guys that was really good when he was really young. The problem was that Travis had injury trouble and wasn't good enough to play anywhere else on the field, so it was like second base or bust for him, and he's now out of baseball. Not that that's Vaughn Grissom, but we're seeing a pattern with Atlanta, and this is Anthopoulos' Atlanta with Devin Travis, where they tried to let him play and it didn't work out. Maybe he doesn't want to repeat that pattern here with Vaughn Grissom. So interesting to note, they didn't sign someone to take his place. It's just one of the like Orlando Arcia option type guys here.
Well, I think it's going to be kind of interesting because the one thing that they did as well, like Braden Shoemaker had a reasonable spring as well, and they sent him down with them. That might be an interesting like pairing at AAA to give him some extra second base innings, and they might get those guys swapping positions so that when they come up, they have that depth role in the infield to move Albies into more DH at bats, because he's had some injuries, right? So I could see that being part of the strategy is like, okay, you're primarily played shortstop, but in your career, but you're going to need to play second base, and we don't think you're ready. There could be a lot to that, or vice versa. Maybe they want him to go step up at shortstop, and they want Shoemaker to get ready to play second. Like lots of things going on there, but I think that's an interesting wrinkle to that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And then one of the other ones, Ty, is that Addison Barger, who a lot of guys are very high on right now with Toronto, he was sent down. I did not at any point expect him to be part of the opening day roster if things went well. I mean, last year Toronto took, what was it? Gosuk was a guy who came up and got the spot for like 4 or 5 days. So now it's between Otto Lopez, who's been decent in the spring and was part of the Team Canada and the WBC, and Nathan Lukes, I believe, is the other guy who's more of an outfielder. However, Otto Lopez has played minor league outfield in both left and right field extensively, on top of the fact he's a competent infielder. So I feel like the edges to Lopez, this is your deep league flyers here. We're just trying to give you an idea of what's going on here. Barger might be your long-term guy. Toronto's not going to bring him up right away or start the year with him. But Lopez or Lukes are the other two options for you.
For me, it's always been Lopez because he's a right-handed bat. And funny that Toronto went from being right-handed dominant to almost needing that right-handed depth bat. So I think it's going to be Lopez. Lukes is going to be there if and when George Springer goes on the shelf, because that's going to happen at least once for some part of the season. But I do, or Kiermaier for that matter. So I think Lukes is going down. He's the older guy. He doesn't have his clock started yet, right? That's the other thing too with Lucas,
right?
Is he doesn't have that. So I think for all those reasons, I think it has to be Lopez. Lopez had a good World Baseball Classic with Canada. I just think
it's
the
a
extra
storyline too, right? For that other little mental bump that you want to give. Once upon a time, the man with the van, Daniel Norris, very popular prospect, never really got it together as a starter, not really as a reliever. He's been released by the Reds now, and former number 1 pick Mark Appel of the Guardians, who has now been released by the Phillies. He did at least make his debut last year after leaving baseball for a little bit. He's out. These are, again, deep dynasty, like final roster spot type things. If you can really send somebody if you can really be hurt by one of these guys, your team was not going to do well. So this is maybe a good thing for you. You can go and try to find somebody else. So, but anyway, Ty, that takes care of the hot news. And now we can get on to the fun, exciting dynasty, or not. Yeah, I guess it's our dynasty top 25. You've got your list. I've got mine. As per usual, we do not match up with many guys. I think I see 2 in the top 25 for us that match up. So what we've done here is we've taken everyone who is 25 as of today or younger, and they are eligible for this. So, which is essentially, at least how I looked at it, Ty. You let me know how you did. Guys that I want to have on my team to build around, and that could be variations within your dynasty roster. So for pitchers, I wasn't thinking points leagues because that's kind of normal to pitchers and points leagues are kind of the way you win those leagues. Obviously you need to have competent hitting, but the 2-start guys can make a bigger impact than just having a really good pitcher. So I was thinking kind of like, the standard the 8x8 that we typically talk about on the podcast here, which includes your save holds, your losses also count, and your walks against and hits per 9. So we have the standard 5 categories, as well as adding in a few more. And I don't know, if you want, Ty, should we maybe pick something fun, like one guy outside the top 50 or something, however you want to knock around, but tell everybody how you kind of came to your list. I kind of went with what I said about trying to build my dynasty team around these guys long term, but knowing that I'm always trying to win.
Yeah, like for me, I kind of put a combination of thoughts together. One, and this is the way I build most of my pitching, like long-term guys, who has high floors, right? Who do I know is going to be a pro, right? Like that's kind of the way I like to draft my pitching. And from that, who has the potential for a high ceiling, right? And so with those two thoughts put together, that's kind of where I looked at my list. Now, that brings in some risk, right? And anytime you're drafting young pitching, high school arms especially, there's always inherent risk. We've talked about that many, many times. So we're going to probably touch on the risk on a couple guys tonight. But again, do they have a high floor? Are they likely to have a major impact on almost all fantasy formats? That was my first criteria. And then my second criteria is most of the guys in the top 25 fit that. Now, how do they stack up against each other, right? So that's ultimately the way I looked at my list. It definitely favors some of my guys like that I would seek out, but I wouldn't say it was like I need to have these guys. I try to keep it who has the best upside for most formats. So to answer your question, yes, guys out of the top 50, I'm going to go with a guy right on my 50 mark. You've got him 99. That's Ky Bush in LA with the Angels. I think he's just a big boy, big arm. I like this as a really sneaky guy to move up a lot of boards this season. He's done nothing but be moderately successful so far. And I think he's just one of those really safe bets to find himself in the conversation at this season's end to challenge for a potential roster spot, because that Angels rotation potentially could be without Shohei Ohtani next year. That's very possible, right? So if that's the case, you're going to have some shuffling of the deck, because it's certainly not going to be Tyler Anderson taking the ball on opening day as the go-to guy. Like, it just can't happen. So it'll be interesting to see what they do, but I like Ky Bush to move a lot this season. What about you, Robbie? Who's your guy?
That's interesting. I have Dominic Hamill of the Mets. So I've got him at 55, and he's outside your top 80. And one of the big reasons is that the Mets just all keep getting hurt. And a guy like Hamill, who's 24 right now and absolutely dominant with the Ks, has the opportunity to just kind of be thrust in to the spotlight if needed, even this year. Like, I could absolutely see it happening this year if there's injuries abound. And obviously the Mets are trying to win, and he could be one of those best guys they've got. We know the Mets are loaded with a lot of talent. If they, like on the offensive side, if they chose to deal some of that prospect talent to bring in an arm, then maybe this conversation's a little more moot, or this point is moot. But otherwise, I really like the fact that Hamill has come out of college where he was already considered a sleeper going to the Mets, because I think he was 22 when he was drafted. And in pro ball, he's done nothing but dominate. So I like him to be an absolute under the radar. Wait a second, who is this guy? And then come the end of 2024, he's got 12 wins with the Mets, and he's not your top of the rotation guy, but he's your like fantasy darling.
Well, and here's what, just to kind of put a support metric in there for you. Like my Ky Bush, kind of the same way for me. Like a little bit of the same criteria, the way the Angels kind of fall apart on the rotation side. But what I really like about Ky Bush, you've got a 6'6" guy, right? And we talked about this a little bit with Adrian Painter, who we'll talk about again later. But 6'6" guy, but the whip is 1.18 last year, right? So I like that for a big guy that's coming through the minors. The interesting point here, and the reason I'm flagging him, is that his strikeouts per 9 was 8.8, Robbie. Right, that's going to jump this season. I see it in the 9.5 range at the end of this season, and I think that's really why he's going to springboard up lists. because I think most people are like, the strikeout potential is not there. It's going to come. And when it does, I think that's going to change the way people look at him, because the rest of what he's been doing, the body of work is good. So that's why I'm in on that one.
Okay. I wanted to make sure I did say it for Hamill here. So he finished at high A last year. So obviously that's a lot of work he's going to have to do to climb up. But on 119 innings, 145 Ks. And when he got to high A, he dropped his ERA. And this is in 11 starts versus 14 at A ball, 55 and 2/3 innings. And he had 74 Ks and a whip of 1.08. So a guy on point here. And again, not coveted yet, but I feel like just with the way things can work out with the Mets, he is their top pitching prospect outside of Blake Tidwell, who was he drafted this past year? Tidwell?
He was.
He's very recently, right? 22nd rounder this past year. Yeah. So anyway, that's a guy outside. Somebody that both of us have outside is Tanner Beebe with Cleveland, who people are excited about. For me, it's a matter of he's further back in the line, and we've already seen a Cody Morris type guy come up and, then turn into something different. Connor Pilkington was another guy who there was some hope for that turned into, more of the relief pitcher type guy. I also see someone like Will Dion with Cleveland, who I do have outside my top 50. But I really like his K-9 last year and the way he handled himself. He's also 22. So BB at 24 versus Dion, a lefty at 22, could be AAA teammates this year. And it could just be interesting to see how that guy or that kind of goes with Cleveland. Seeing how they line up the AAA rotation will be very interesting to me, which is such a funny thing to say. Like, I can't wait to see how they slot them at AAA.
Well, I think it's interesting. And I think Cleveland's rotation depth has been overanalyzed a little bit because of the recent success too. Like, outside of Espino, like I'm not really that excited about too many of their arms. Like Xavier Curry has a little bit of interest to me. I just don't see eliteness. Like I see a bunch of like Plesac and Savales and guys that can be in a rotation but not really be elite. Like outside of Espino. That's that.
Well, we'll have a conversation when we hit number 17 on our list, because that's one of the few guys we actually tied on. As far as Cleveland,
I did forget about him. Yeah, he's in that category too.
Yeah, so we both have him ranked higher than Espino.
Yeah, there's two. Yeah, I did forget about him in that statement. But two outside of those two, like there's other guys that everyone's kind of coveting because Cleveland's had success with their rotation, not because these guys are great. They're just like, they're going to be good. Cleveland has it figured out.
Yeah. Coach him up. That's exactly.
So let's start in from 25, Robbie, and get going that way.
Yeah.
So for me, 25 is a guy that I think is not high enough on any boards. I've said it before, and he's been slow rolled by the Mariners a little bit, and that's Emerson Hancock. Like I know, Robbie, you're in on Hancock in spots. We've talked about him between you and I, but I think industry wise, he's not high enough on a lot of boards, and that's because he hasn't been pumped up in innings. Right? He didn't get that full throttle like Gilbert did and then Kirby did, right? Like he's been slower to develop. And I think it's because they've been rebuilding him just a little bit. And I think it's because the fastball and the changeup are elite and they wanted to get that third pitch there. So I think that's why they've slow played him. I think it's partly why he's been a little banged up, is trying to do some of that. But here's a guy that I think slots above Logan Gilbert for me in the long run. And that's saying without whatever this splitter is going to be this season. I haven't seen enough of it yet to say that Logan Gilbert can't maybe elevate beyond that. But I have Kirby, Hancock, Gilbert in my mind right now.
I'll just give everybody a quick rundown on the need to knows for Hancock. So you can find him on Twitter at Emerson Hancock _. Probably the most important part. He's 23 years old, 6'4", 213. He is a righty. He played last year at AA, 21 starts, 3.75 ERA in 98 1/3 innings pitched. The flag that everybody's giving is the fact that he only had 92 strikeouts. That's fine, but everybody wants to see 140. The whip was 1.2 and 38 walks. So okay with the walks. You obviously want an elite type pitcher to be a little lower, but Hancock is the number 2 pitching prospect with the Mariners behind Bryce Miller, according to, I'm just very quickly looked on MLB.com's prospect rankings, just to get that. My number 25 is far less exciting for most people. That's Reed Detmers with the Angels. This is, to me, a plug and play. You can go between, the SP3-4, kind of safely setting him in that range for yourself on your fantasy depth chart. He to me is someone who is going to just start for years and not necessarily be the reason that you have won leagues, because he's not going to be one of those like perennial 200 strikeout type guys, 180 innings, but he could just like plug and play. He's not a select start. 3 things need to go right for him. I think Detmers can just be a fantasy roster asset, and he's undervalued. And for me, having him at 25, I think there's a lot of value to a Reed Detmers. Like if you're in a startup league, Reed Detmers is a great guy to throw on your roster and then just keep building around and like looking for your superstars elsewhere. And Detmers, you can just consistently play. Obviously, we're assuming health here, good health.
So there's one guy, like the comparable I have for him, and it's an old school kind of guy. Aaron Seeley is a guy that I see Reed Detmers as, like, similar kind of guy. Seeley had like 1 elite season, maybe 2, if I'm grasping at it, but he was always kind of there. The big hook, we see a lot less of the loopy hooks anymore. But Detmers has a little bit of that. The big thing I have with Detmers, and I've said this before, and I hate that I'm even bringing this up, but the expected batting average versus the batting average, against the fastball last season, 232, the expected batting average was 262. Against the changeup, 299, and the batting average actually was 268. So with that, and then the sinker, the last one, the one he threw the least, probably will eliminate this year, because the batting average against the sinker was 200 and the expected is 335. So, that probably will mean a slight bump in ERA, but I like what you said, Robbie, in terms of he is going to be a starter. He's going to go out there and get innings. He's a better version of Aaron Savale. So he's got a little more quality stuff, right? But it's going to be the same kind of like grinder, give me 6 innings, right?
You're looking at like a best case scenario would be like 15 quality starts, 12 wins, but you could always have that J.A. Happ, it all comes together season, where all of a sudden he wins 20 games and he's on your roster. So
kind of like a left-handed Merrill Kelly, might be, like, not in terms of stuff.
There you go.
Just
okay. Well, that's a great sign for Dynasty, because Merrill Kelly's like 12 years older than Detmers right now and just came off his best season. So that's a slow play of all time right there. So who do you have at your 24, Ty?
Yeah, this is one that I don't think anybody's really super, super forward on. And there was an accidental first overall pick in one of our off-season drafts. That's Tink Hence with St. Louis.
That was funny.
So I just don't think enough people are high on Tink Hence right now. Like, the stuff's legit. He's in the St. Louis system. So I think a lot of the pros analysis guys are putting him lower because they know he's going to be slow played. And they don't want to, like, this is a top 10 guy that you need to be thinking about, because they know he could be 4 years away in the Cardinals organization, right? So I think that's part of it. But I think of the guys there, Libator, Grafacio, or whatever that guy's name is, Tink Hence is the best of that group, in my opinion. And I think he's the one guy they have in their system that has true ace upside. And that's why I like him. I just think there's enough there. Not to mention, like, Tink Hence is an absolute baller, like, ace name. So you just put him in the hall right now.
Yeah, that is a great name. Another great name that has yet to get the respect, Ty, is my number 24, Casey Mize. Everyone has loved to forget Casey Mize, former first overall pick with the Tigers, recovering now from Tommy John. And didn't we talk a couple weeks ago about how he also had a secondary surgery, or maybe that was some other player? Anyway, regardless, on the road to recovery. Mize has never reached the heights expected of him, but as soon as he was drafted, everybody just started downplaying his skills and abilities, which was just fantastic, because that's what happens with an obvious number 1 pick in the MLB draft, who also becomes the, quote, obvious number 1 pick in your fantasy leagues, is everyone needs to state the reason why, their opinion on why he shouldn't do what he's supposed to do is right. So Casey Mize is going to come back and he's going to have a really good career, ideally with a Detroit Tigers team that's on the up and up and better defensively than when he was there pre-injury and all of 2021. So I'd really like to see Casey Mize quietly sneak back in and be one of many Detroit Tiger pitchers who are good, not disappointments, because there are quite a few. There's a rotation and a half of them that are with the Tigers right now that if I could clear a house, I think all but 2 of those guys, Mize would be one of the 2 would be gone. Or sorry, would be kept. Mize would be kept with one other.
Well, I'm with you. Like we talked about it heading into last season, that last year was supposed to be his breakout, and he just didn't get enough runway to get there. So, you know, we're a year away from Mize, but I like him as a trade target, right? Especially if you're in a rebuilding roster. Like love that as a trade target for anybody in that. Now, if you need to be really strong in the first half of next year, he's not going to be there. But second half, like you could see some good Casey Mize in the second half of next year. I think that's very realistic.
The trade target thing, Ty. I think that's a great way to go with your look to get him this year in like deals, important deals in your dynasty, but know that you're doing this for the 2024 and beyond play, really 2025 impact and beyond.
Yeah, like I don't even think we're going to see him this year. Like I don't think that the Tigers have any intentions of running him out in the fall or anything like that. So he could maybe go get some innings in the fall league. That's
depending on how that works. I don't know exactly how they do that with who does and doesn't go, especially for someone like him who wouldn't be a minor. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Who do you got at 23?
I got Luis Patino in Tampa Bay, and in this one definitely fits the higher floor more so than the higher ceiling. Patino's a solid pitcher. I don't believe he has the ace upside everyone once thought he did. I think he could have SP2 upside, but I think we'd all be really happy if he was an elite SP3. That's kind of where I have him, maybe on the backside of SP2. And I like him here because it limits your risk, right? It lets you take risk on like a guy like Tink Hence. If you have Patino and Hence, you know, to kind of look at building around, like that's a good combination. You know, those are the kind of plays that you have to think about when you're building your pitching. Is like who's gonna be a safe guy? Who's your Reed Detmers? Who's your Luis Patino? These are guys that fit that mold. So same reason you had Detmers in there, Robbie. I had Patino. Love the fastball command. The slider's good enough to be great. And it's Tampa Bay, so you've got to assume the changeup's going to come along here. I mean, that's just the reality.
Yeah, my only sign with Patino is he's at the point for me where like I need to see it. Like I was in and excited, but just like his time with San Diego, it was cusp, right? Like he was at the point where we were ready to see it, and now we're 3 years past that point, and we're still waiting to see it. Last year he had more AAA time than MLB time, but
remember he's 23. He's 23.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it's not like he should be elite right now. Like he should be just coming into his own. Like 2021 he did throw 77 innings. The whip was 127, Robbie, which I know you like. 4.31. Like as a 21-year-old turning 22, I'm a fan of that. Like I think that plays.
Yeah, as the starting point, that was great. It's just that we haven't seen it back since then, and then the K-9. So I'm not saying I'm out. I've got him inside my top 50. I think he just landed somewhere in the 40s for me. I don't remember exactly, but my 23rd guy is the hot hand type dude, Kyle Harrison from San Francisco. He's a 6'2", 200-pound, 21-year-old, drafted in 2020 in the 3rd round, and last year with the Richmond Flying Squirrels. Great name. Would like to see what the hat looks like. He had actually was combined 2 teams, A and AA. He had a 2.71 ERA in 113 innings with 186 strikeouts. That's right, everybody. We like the punch outs. He was punching tickets. That's what it is. He was punching tickets. 1.13 whip as well. So fantasy darling, no. Fantasy ace, yes. And when you get onto all these lists of like guys that are high flying, exciting, whatever, there are ones that have risk. Harrison, not one of those guys, because he's already played pro ball for a couple years. He's got 2021 and 2022 full seasons under his belt, and I like that for a 21-year-old. This isn't the other Andrew Painter type guys where there's, like some experience to pro ball and super high expectation. Kyle Harrison has, had 2 seasons of it. Let's just see what he can do this year. Ideally starting at AAA, but I mean, San Francisco's got 7 kind of SP4s.
Yeah.
So I don't know that they're going to rush a guy like him, but if they're doing well, then maybe we could see him at some point this year. And
I like
to boot.
I like the tick down on hits per 9. I like the tick down on walks per 9. The flat level of K per 9, jumping from A ball to AA last year. Like I like that. Like there's a lot of like signs here. I've got him just a little bit higher, Robbie. So I'm going to cover him right with you. I have him at 18, right? So I'm there because what you said, like the floor is there for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
He fits that mold that we've talked about. He's 6'2", he's thick. Like those are the guys that I've talked about a lot that just magically tend to be good pitchers consistently, right? So I'm in for Kyle Harrison in a lot of ways, and in reality, there's nobody stopping him from stealing innings at the pro level. So it's just a matter of when he's ready, he will have a roster spot on that team, which not every guy on this list has that pathway. So that's a huge part for pitchers, like you said early on, like who's getting that path. And you talked about the Mets. Giants have, far less resistance than the Mets do.
I mean, we need to see 4 injuries before he'd even have the option.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And next on my list is the aforementioned Daniel Espino at 22. This is a prep arm, an elite arm. He had a little bit of an injury bump here early in the offseason. So he's going to be a little slow rolled at the beginning of the year. I think that we've seen this be a trend, Robbie. I've commented on it several times. Like, I think we're seeing smaller injuries get flagged as bigger injuries because they want everyone to stop looking at them and they want them to just be able to go and do work with people not really expecting them to be super successful. I think there's a bit of a PR cycle that's being built around prospects today. But Espino has the stuff. He had the mechanics out of high school. He had a lot of really good things that, when we did that draft, Robbie, if you remember, that was one of the guys that I flagged as like, this guy's a major league arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's done nothing but show us that, right? He's delivered on that promise. And I think he's going to be one of these guys in the Guardians system that justifies the future trade of Shane Bieber. So I think, Guardian fans, cover your ears, but that's just a matter of time because they do have all that depth. And Bieber could help them go get that middle of the order bat they desperately need. So just makes too much sense for a rebuilding Guardians team that had a great run last year. I don't think it's repeatable for this year, but I do think this is a guy that you can kind of lean on looking forward as a guy you're going to see in that rotation.
Yeah. Next up for me at 22 is Hunter Brown with Houston, 24-year-old. Came up last year, had 20 1/3 innings pitched, 2 wins, 22 Ks in that time, a dazzling .89 ERA, and 2 quality starts within that. But also Ty was able to find himself 2 holds. So Hunter Brown, utility guy last year. This is kind of the classic prospect break-in that we used to see. The big name that comes to mind is David Price, right? Starts as an RP, fills in as necessary, and then comes in the next year and is just a legitimate starting pitcher. And again, it's on a good team. Houston has a few question marks. The Altuve injury, that's only going to be to start the year. That's not 162 game, punch in the arm. Like they'll get over that. If anything, it might open the door for somebody that they weren't previously going to have on the roster to start, who could have been at AAA. So anyway, Hunter Brown, somebody that I like, should be just an every 5th day major league starter moving forward.
Here's the one thing I flagged this last year, Robbie, for Hunter Brown. Like my big concern here is the lack of a pitch that can get in on righties. He's got the good slider. He's got an elite fastball. He technically threw a couple sinkers and a couple splitters last year, but that accounted for exactly 9 pitches. So for me, and I said this, one of the guys in our office knew him from college, and so they're buddies a little bit. And I said, listen, this kid's got all the right things, but he needs a changeup. Sinker would be okay, but he would really be good if he could develop a changeup because he's got hard stuff. Like even his slider, I think he throws at 92, right? So something that can really break down that velocity that protects your fastball in the inner half of the plate. That's what's missing here, because if he adds that, Robbie, he's number one on our list, right? Like he has that upside. But without that changeup, I actually think he's a bullpen arm. That's where I'm
Oh,
at
really?
on him. Yeah. Because I think the other stuff isn't protected based on the repertoire, because the curveball, slider, we're just back in the Nelson Lamet territory, right? I mean, if you don't have elite location with those 3 pitches, which he doesn't, then you can't be an elite major league pitcher with that setup, because
Okay.
fastballs they take to left field, sliders and curveballs they take to right field, and you're very susceptible because it's not hard. You're guessing between 2, maybe 3 pitch types, right? Let's call it 2.5 because the curveball slider are too close. So, I think he needs that last pitch for him to break through the ceiling.
All right. So who do you have up at your 21? Is that where we are for you?
21. Yeah, I've got Bobby Miller. I think is a forgotten soldier in LA. I think we're going to see a lot of Bobby Miller this year, Robbie. I don't think we're going to see him out of camp. I think he's going to be broken in later, first man up kind of thing. I just think this is an arm that everyone entering last year, Robbie, I think you liked him too heading into last year a little bit.
Yep.
Was just like, this guy's going to be great. And I think he is going to be. But I don't think he's going to break the roster. I don't think we're going to see him immediately. And I don't think we're going to see him till maybe closer to the midpoint of the summer. But I could see him being a very important arm down the stretch. And on the flip side of that, he could, depending on the way the Dodgers are set up and how whatever mishmash of lineup they end up going into the season with looks like, he could also be dangled in a trade, right? So I think either way, there's room for Bobby Miller value this season. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But the stuff's absolutely there, and it's been developing slowly over the last couple seasons.
Well, he's part of that 2020 draft of the Dodgers that they took 5 pitchers in 5 rounds, and I was kind of intrigued, and I've been interested in them because all arms looked pretty good at the time. One of them, Clayton Beeter, was dealt last year to the Yankees, and he had a ton of Ks, but is not a complete pitcher at this point in time. So he doesn't make my list. But another incomplete pitcher did. Yeah, Ty.
Sorry, last
ruining
point
my
Bobby.
Transition.
Sorry, buddy.
Ruining my
the last part. Just for Bobby Miller, the thing that gets me a little bit excited was it was still a small start. 4 starts at AAA to finish off last season, and he dropped both his ERA and his WHIP. Right, so although it's small sample, it is end of season, and he maintained the K per 9. So I like that progression. I think he's going to start at AAA. He's going to get more innings. But that's why I see that, just to give some people things to look for when we're talking about these guys. Sorry. Back to your transition, Robbie. Take it away.
Transition over. I'm no longer transitioning. I've got at number 21, Atlanta Brave disappointment, Ian Anderson. After 22 starts and a 5 ERA last year, he was sent down. This year, Ty, just sent down again. I shouldn't say just sent down a week ago. But sent down again, not going to start, not going to be in that top 5. He's probably not even next man up. But here's the thing. Here's why he's still on the list for me at 21. There's promise here. He's 24 years old. Atlanta's got Mike Soroka also as a project coming back. Ian Anderson adds to the prospect, well, not a prospect, but the project thing. You have other guys like, Bryce Elder, who's another one who was kind of vying for that spot. It looks like Jared Schuster's going to get it with the Braves. Good for him. But then there's other guys like Darius Vines, who's all in that mix, which is going to push Atlanta Brave pitchers to be good. And it's going to, I hope, allow the pitching coach at AAA to really hone in on Anderson getting command. And when he gets command, he should be right back up and back in the regular rotation. So it's a matter of what has he done that has created like a hitch or something in his delivery. Something's happening that should be corrected and should be able to be found on video to be corrected, so that he's not only a lost cause, he's back as a regular in the rotation, but his dynasty value will be completely recouped 18 months from now. So this is like a buy low suggestion here at the same time as you have to really be able to manage your roster, because Anderson's not a rookie. So he's not going to, unless your league set up that if they're in the minors, you can put him in your minors. Like most leagues are, if they're not a rookie, they can't go into, a rookie slot or something like that. But I would look to get Anderson everywhere I can really early in April, and then just watch what's going on at AAA. Actually, like, try to find the starts. If you have MLB TV and you can also add on the extra, whatever it is, $25 for the year to get MILB TV, and you watch some AAA games, he's a great guy to watch. Like, see what he's doing if you actually want to spend the time to do it, right? If you really want to win your leagues, this is what you need to do. You need to see how he's pitching and then make a choice if you want to invest in him or not. I highly recommend the buy low on Ian Anderson. That's why he's 21.
Yeah, no, I don't hate that one, Robbie. I just the big concern I have there is like a guy like this with the upside that he should have. Like, he didn't come into camp with any improvements. Like, that's my big concern. I share all of your thoughts elsewhere. Like, I'm not saying I'm not going to go try to get him exactly the same way you just suggested it. But, for me, it's the big red flag I have on Ian Anderson. The reason he's not in my top 25, because he has been the last couple seasons, as you know. He was one of my highest ranked pitchers last year because I thought he would break through it. I'm going the other way because I'm not seeing the progression that should be there. So that's my big concern. I'm still in. I'm not out, definitely not out yet, but I am very, very concerned.
All right, well, all this Ian Anderson talk has forced me into another lunchbox here. So let's get to some better news. Who do you have at 20?
Next for me at 20, sorry, is a reliever and a major leaguer in Emmanuel Clase. This is just an elite arm. I don't need to spend a ton of time on Clase because everyone's pretty familiar with his body of work. And there's just enough here. Like, you're going to book 25 to 30 saves plus for the next 15 years. Like, book it. It's over, right? So his stuff is as good as you can find in a major league bullpen, and it just plays. So barring any injury, like, this guy's as good as it gets in that bullpen that you're going to find.
Fair point there. And also, because we're doing dynasty pitchers, of course, that includes relief pitchers. Clase, I think, is the highest ranked guy on mine. I might have. Do you have Munoz in your top 25 somewhere or not?
Well, Munoz didn't make it into my top 25.
No, okay. No. But anyway, there's only a couple, which was the point that are of closers who are, or potential closers for a long time, who are 25 or under. It's hard to find them, but when you do, lock and load. Pay for the guy once you know they're going to be in that position for you. And I mean, very much like if you can get a high K guy who's with the Guardians. Let me introduce y'all to Logan Allen, 24-year-old lefty. He's a big changeup guy. That's how he gets the high Ks. He's fooling you with the fastball, got good command. But as soon as he got promoted to AAA, I think he left his command back in AA, and things changed a little bit for him. So I think that's just going to be one of those off-season adjustments he makes. Comes back strong this year. Logan Allen knocking on the door of the Cleveland Guardians rotation. I'm so glad that wasn't loud enough that my dogs went berserk upstairs. I just thought of that as I did it. Well, anyway, Logan Allen, I'm a big fan. He's number 20.
Anybody around the Great Lakes that had access to cable TV in Michigan will appreciate that. I want Logan Allen in the pros just so I can say Mr. Allen, and that joke will only land for like 3 or 4 people listening. And I'm good with that. I
don't know what you're talking about.
But there's a commercial. It was an old shoe company, or like, I don't even know if it's a shoe company. It was like a shoe warehouse kind of store in Michigan, and it was Mr. Allen. And then the whole commercial was 29, 2 for 50. And it was just this guy with like baggy pants, and like, he was a cool guy. It was like, I'm Mr. Allen.
Right.
So I want this because it's like my childhood, and it's a big thing. Guy up here inside my top 20 at 19, Josiah Gray. Robbie, I know you've been talking about him all off season. I was a little late to the party because I didn't see it in the starts that I watched last year, Robbie, but I did see a tightening. That progression we just talked about with Anderson, I expected. Josiah Gray has it, and so I think he still is an elite SP2. I'm not quite sure he's an SP1. That's kind of where I'm stuck. I'd love for him to break through on that one. And it's why he's a little further back. Like, I could see him ending up higher on this list in the outcome. But I think for me, there's just still too much. Like, we're getting into ace territory with this list. So, there's just too much uncertainty with how high he can go. So that's the only thing holding me back. But there's huge major league innings. There's strikeouts. There's a good team being built around him in Washington right now. So I like the long-term upside in a big way.
Okay. I have him at number 11. I agree with everything you said. It's all about progression with him, and then, seeing those improvements year over year. And now we know that he's going to be continuing to throw to Kyber Ruiz. So things are, should be onward and upward. My number 19 guy, I'm going to skip because he is your number 10, and I'll leave top 10 guys out of it so that we can do our top 10 together without skipping. Number 18 for me was Daniel Espino, who we already covered. Looking for big things from him this year, mainly innings pitched. I'd like to see a lot of innings pitched for him to see what we really have with him. But number 17, also Cleveland, Gavin Williams. I think this is ace potential, 23-year-old righty with the Guardians. But he's further back for me because I think there's a lot of cloudiness amongst Cleveland and exactly how things will progress, because there's only so many starting pitcher openings for the Guardians. And like you had said about the potential Bieber trade, I think that's like just going to happen because they've given money elsewhere. So they're not going to give it to pitching, which means they're going to be these Gavin Williams type guys who come up, and the Aaron Savales of the world who start to make $4, $8, $10 million. They're going to be gone before the end of their arbitration, but it's how quickly are we going to see it? And I don't know that Gavin Williams is going to be put up and aggressively tasked to get outs at major league pitching. But I do feel like he's legitimately going to have a good, long MLB career. So I really like him. It's just a matter of the start date for me. But he is my highest ranked Cleveland Guardian pitcher, above Espino, above Allen.
Yeah. No, and I'm there with you. Like you said, we both got him at 17. So, we're both in agreement on where he is, and everything else we've said about Cleveland tonight. It's right there. I've already mentioned Kyle Harrison, who I have at 18. So we don't need to spend any time on him. So bumping ahead here, my 16 guy is your 10. So I'm going to jump ahead to Shane Baz at 15, which is a guy that, fits the criteria I mentioned off the start. High floor, high ceiling. The only thing that people are concerned with on Baz is the injury. And it is a crucial concern because he had a very devastating injury. And he may never be the same. That's entirely possible. But with a guy like Shane Baz, the upside that is there, I will roll the dice on a guy like Shane Baz all day, every day in a dynasty format because the upside is so high. If I have to wait 2 years for it, that's fine for me. I can play that game. A lot of owners don't have that patience. So that's where I'm at on Shane Baz.
I've got Baz in our 24 team 8x8 league, where it's $100 buy-in for us. I think he has been the most asked about trade player to be traded away from my roster. I did not word that properly, but there's a lot of talk about people wanting CJ Abrams. There's a lot, or not a lot of talk. There's a lot of offers for CJ Abrams, who I have on my roster, because people are thinking either like dud or superstar, but it doesn't seem to be like everyday, MLBer is amongst that, like where he could land. It's either they think one or the other. So they're trying to buy low, like way too low, or they're trying to give me what I deem to be anyway, fair value. But I just want to see what CJ Abrams actually is. And the other guy is Shane Baz, and it's the exact same conversation. Some guys are like, he might never come back, like depending on how people like to give you trade offers, right? Sometimes they like to tell you how terrible your player is, and then, wow, I'll take him though. And then there's the other thing of like, I think he could be good, man, but I just don't know when. And that's very realistic, right? Like, how long are we going to need to wait on Baz? Just like you said, Ty, I'm willing to wait. I think he's going to be worth it.
I think he's kind of in like Casey Mize territory. Like it's definitely not going to be this year. We're looking at next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like now's the time to buy. And really, like if you're looking at championship runs in 24 and beyond, like this is a great target. Like spend what you need to spend to get him, because you'll thank yourself later. I mean, obviously there's risk, but there's risk with any other healthy guy on this list.
Yeah, I would argue right now, I know we don't talk a lot about trading your draft picks for, prospects or things like that a lot on this podcast, But once the draft comes and goes for MLB in June, like the Rule 4 draft, if you're coming up to your your fantasy league deadline, and you don't think you're going to be in that bottom four, I guess, picking 1 through 4 in the draft, I would absolutely trade a first round pick to pick up a Shane Baz under the radar. And I would not think twice about it. And when the draft comes around and I'm like, oh, I don't get to pick this guy or that guy. Part of that reason might be because in the years coming after that, you'll be winning the league because you've got a guy like Baz on your roster instead of taking one of those ranked 5th through 29th type prospects who, could really never even amount to anything. But at least with Baz, where he stands within Tampa Bay. It's a matter of him getting back to being healthy. So Ty, my 16 is your 2. So that'll be a fun conversation. So I will leave it, but we will go to my 15, which is your 36. So you messed up and I did great. Jose Suarez. And this is me just pounding on the drum. You know how many years I've been talking about him, Ty? This will be year 3. You know why? Because he's been an MLBer for 3 years now. But this year he's locked and loaded in the rotation. Jose Suarez is a forgotten man on the Angels, but he's going to continue. He is very much like teammate Reid Detmers. He's going to continue to come out and be good. I would love to see him do the Cliff Lee thing where he slowly continues to improve to the point that he's like a perennial all-star. I don't want to go and give him that tag. He is my 15th ranked guy though. So I clearly think he's going to be good moving forward. It's just, I don't know that he's an SP2 ever. It's just that he could be a really solid SP3 type SP4. When I say that, I mean, he's winning a 10-12 consistently. He's getting 12 plus quality starts. The ERA is 3.75 or lower. K per 9 is good and he's not blown up with walks. His issue absolutely could be the competitiveness of the Angels, which would hurt his ability to get wins. But let's just play the optimistic Anthony Rendon gets 100 RBI thing that I'm seeing all over Twitter. A healthy Rendon is 100. Let's say a healthy Angels lineup is a 15-win Jose Suarez for years to come. Sign me up for that all day. And he's 25.
Well, you want to hear a comp that'll get you super excited? Because I actually think he's a poor man's Tom Glavine, right? Very similar.
Yeah, cool.
So very similar stuff. Has an offense that, to your point, can get him 15 wins easily. And he's had subtle improvements over the last couple of years. So I wasn't in on him, Robbie. And you turned me on Jose Suarez. I like him in a lot of formats. In last year, a lot of people don't realize he was sub 4, right? He's not even on people's radars as a sub 4. And
he didn't start the year in the rotation. They did a 6-man rotation, so a lot of people didn't care anyway. But once he got in, he was fine, consistent player.
Well, and I don't think a lot of people project him to be in this year either, and that's a shame because I think he's going to be. I think a lot of people are going to miss out on that one, so I'm with you on that one. So where are we going here? Jumping back into mine, we've talked 15, 14 hurts because it's your 4, and we're gonna have to talk about that one again. So that one stinks. But another one that we both agreed on here, we talked about it a little bit earlier. It's Logan Gilbert. We got him there. I think Logan Gilbert for me is the highest floor of guys on this list, right? I think he's just a guy that is going to be useful, period. And I think that's why I have him higher than I do Hancock, even though I said earlier I have Hancock above Gilbert. This is one that I bumped higher because of the floor. And so the splitter thing for me, that's the one, I can't, that's enough to make him a top 5 guy on this list, Robbie, right? If that pitch is effective, but we don't know enough yet. Is it going to be great? Is it going to cause arm injuries, which splitters do? But everything else about Logan Gilbert's the kind of bulldog starting pitcher that I tend to be drawn to.
Yeah. Knowing the situation within the Mariners starting rotation this year, they still have 6 legit starters. It's going to be fun to see how it all plays out.
Wow. Marco Gonzalez is not a starter.
Well, I think it's Flexen that's on the outside looking in on this one. But could also be that final week trade, the week leading up trade where, whatever the Mariners are feeling about, their top 8 kind of starting pitchers, they're like, yeah, let's make a move. Let's do it. I'd love to see Gilbert, wire to wire, but I think there's another guy we're going to see that does that, who's going to be the big dog on the Mariners this year, outside of the fact that Robbie Ray has been electric in the spring.
Really quick stop for you, Robbie. World Baseball Classic update. Your season is on the line. Shohei Ohtani's in closing, pumping gas in the World Baseball Classic. So UCL, hang on, baby. Let's go.
I was going to say, well, it's UCL or it's he gets a comebacker off the shin. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, he just threw 101, which I'm sure is the juice on that radar gun.
That's exactly what the Angels are wanting to see from him in March.
Well, there's no way that the radar gun's not pumped up for TV right now. There's no way. Like, he's probably throwing 97 and they're just making a big deal out of him pumping 100. He just backed it up with 100. So the likelihood of Shohei pumping 101, 100 out of the pen this point in the season, maybe not.
If it is happening, it shouldn't be. So here's a guy who
he's hucking it, dog. I will say that.
A guy who I don't think has hit 100. We didn't have on the list because I thought he was 27. Turns out he's not, and I don't know how math works. Nick Lodolo with the Reds, who pitched 103 and a third innings last year, a very respectable ball, 131 Ks. Problem was it was with the Reds, so he only had 4 wins for his effort. 3.66 ERA, 8 quality starts, which I would like to say on a terrible team like the Reds, you look at the quality starts and imagine how hard he had to fight just to get 8. So you make the team a bit better, you make the defense a bit better. And we're talking a bit. I'm not talking about 4, like doing the Texas Ranger overhaul here. I'm talking about just some minor improvements. And Lodolo can be a dozen plus quality start guy, and he can be an 8 to 12 win type guy as early as 2023. I really like him moving forward. Obviously, the K to 9 is huge, something you want to see. Nick Lodolo moving forward is only limited by the team around him. I don't think he's limited by his ability to pitch.
Well, and the K per 9 was the big thing, I think, that held him down a lot of people's lists. And like, Robbie, you heard me talking about it. Like, I don't get why people aren't in on this guy, right? Like, he was an obvious guy breakout wise for me, because the location stuff was there right out of college, right? The stuff was crisp, very safe bet in terms of drafting Nick Lodolo when he came out of college. So, I'm not surprised he's here. He is part of a 2-headed monster right now in Cincinnati. Like, they've got a great rotation coming together there, which is awesome because they have a lot of offensive pieces right behind it. So the Reds are going to be fun to watch in about a year here, if not 2 years. So, we might see a Baltimore Cincinnati Reds World Series here in the very near future.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
Right?
Imagine that. Wow. That was
There's just so many people just cringed right there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like where the Reds beat out the Pirates and
yeah, it's the best.
So anyway, who do you have up next? We're getting close to being in the top 10 when we're going to start to sync up a lot more here.
Yeah, this one for me is one that I don't think a lot of people would have as high as I do, but I think just the breakthrough last season was there. The thing that for me, Robbie, is just the whip for this guy came way, way down because I don't think anybody really questioned the stuff. Even before he was traded, I don't think anybody really questioned the stuff. And this is the Jesus Lizard here, Jesus Luzardo in Miami. That rotation is a great rotation already. It's only going to get better. And Luzardo, I think, is the number 2 guy there. I don't know that he's going to start as the number 2 guy because I think they're going to give the old man Cueto the 2 slot.
Really?
I think so.
Just jiving and shaking.
Yeah, I mean, he's just going to go out there and give you some consistency, right? Like, he's been around the block. You're not going to have any of that, like, first week where your entire rotation only throws 3 innings and your bullpen's just dead. Right, you give a guy like that a little bit of stability, and you just end up in a scenario where, you're in a really, really good spot. So I like Luzardo a lot this year. I think he's going to be one of, if not the breakout lefty. So it'll be interesting to see where he finishes the year. But I like him a lot. The stuff plays. It is just location. And the whip for me is a huge indicator of what we're going to see here.
All right. My next guy up here, number 12 for me, you've got him at 20. Oh, sorry. I guess you had him at 25. You made a move just before we started recording. Final edits, and he got bumped out, is 23-year-old Rosny Contreras with the Pirates. He was a very popular pick last year for people saying, like, sleeper in redraft. Whereas for Dynasty, a lot of people were like, oh, cool, he's up early. And then it just didn't go great. But he went back to AAA last year, had 9 starts there, a 3.15 ERA, and 34 and a third innings. He had 46 strikeouts, which is what we wanted to see from him. And he kept the whip in control at 1.22. Then he came back up, finished the year with a 1.27 whip. Hit the K rate here. Sorry, the K's tie were 86 in 95 innings. Not what we wanted to see, but it was a bad start to the year. Then he went to AAA, came back, and he was better rest of the way and ended with a 3.79 ERA. Again, terrible team he's playing for. He had 5 wins with the big league club. More importantly, only 5 losses. That's called pitcher management. If you're in a points league, Contreras is not going to be as valuable to you because he's a Pirate, and that could be, give or take if your league settings, if you get 5 points for a win, let's say 5 points for a loss, because some people want to really try to level those things off. He's going to be a wash this year also. He could have 10 wins, could have 10 losses. The longer he stays in games, the more likely it is the Pirates are going to find a way to screw him over. So what he's got to do in the meantime is not lose that game. We saw this, a long time ago, but we saw this with an elite pitcher named Roy Halladay in Toronto. The team was garbage. Halladay went out, and you were pumped to see what he could do. Contreras isn't that guy yet. Might never, ever see that type of ceiling, but the potential is there for Contreras to be a longtime major leaguer. We could see a decade plus of solid pitching. And for me, he's in at 12, almost despite the team around him at the moment. I am looking forward, multiple years down the road before we really start to see Contreras take over games, ideally being able to be a locked and loaded quality start guy.
Yeah, I the upside's there. The arm talent's there. It's just a matter of whether he can keep it together at the major league roster and can survive Pittsburgh's rebuild. That's a thing that we don't talk about a lot with pitchers, is like, what is their mental makeup, right? And we talk about college arms tending to be ones that survive because they've been through a little bit of a different, ringer, right? Whereas the high school arms don't really have that mental endurance, right? So an interesting one. Ohtani just struck out Trout to end the World Baseball Classic. So
that's amazing.
Fun,
there you go.
Fun little
That's
marketing thing for everybody. Yeah, right. Yeah. So getting into top 10 here, Robbie, I think we're into the top 10 on my side. Hunter Green is the other part of the two-headed monster. I've 11 and 10, Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, and I feel Hunter Green is a guy that everyone's like, I throws 1 of 5. He's a novelty. He can't be a great starting pitcher. I think this is a guy people are missing on right now, and I think it's a guy that has really, really easy arm or velocity, I guess. 105 doesn't come out easy, right? Like, it just doesn't. And for Hunter Green, it does. It's about the easiest 105 I've seen. And for that reason, like, I'm excited about that because the other stuff doesn't have to be great when you're setting it up with 105. And so I think that's the one thing here. He's a very safe bet, but the ceiling is elite. And I watched a handful of starts last year, and I've got to be honest, like, I wasn't as invested into him as I should have been watching him, because I got trapped in the thing I just mentioned, which is the novelty. But I'm correcting myself in a big way because the rest of the stuff plays. And this year could be the beginning of a long run for him, barring health, obviously, as we've talked about many, many times. But I think the upside's here in a big way, and maybe more so than anybody else on this list for me, except for my top 3 guys. Like, he fits into that group of maybe 4 guys that have eliteness almost immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I love him. I've got him further back simply because I'm not sure what the low side of Hunter Green is. He was a high school drafted guy, brought along very slowly by the Reds. And I think he was one of the two-way players, right? Along with, I don't know if I don't think Tristan McKenzie was a two-way player, but anyway, Hunter Green was definitely a two-way player who we weren't quite sure what was going to happen with him. He's a legit starter now. The problem is that I think he is not going to be available via trade.
Correct.
You know, I just had somebody message me, Scotty messaged me in the home league and said he'll trade it all for the Otanis. Some recency bias in a trade offer over the last 3 minutes. So in our home league, Otani, because we play on Yahoo, is both a hitter and a pitcher. However, we've had to state our keepers because the draft, Ty, I'm very excited for, is this weekend. Very sad I'll be doing it from my pocket at work while I have a 14-hour day scheduled. It's going to be great. A plated meal for 280 people at 6 p.m. And I will be leaving the second the last dessert goes out and speeding my way out to Stratford to very quickly have a few lunch boxes and catch up with you guys. So
yeah, Rob wants pastry. Why does he want pastry? What do we do?
Just be texting player names. Anyway, I'm with you on Hunter Green. I love him. My number 10 guy is a huge buy low. And this was like the guy that was getting the super heat. I'm seeing it now with other players. You know, your number 2 guy is getting it too. I'm trying to think of somebody else that number 8 guy for both of us has also been getting it. Teammate. Anyway, my number 10 guy, Max Meyer, 24-year-old, out this year for Tommy John. But Ty, let me tell you something about Max Meyer since he was drafted. 10.5K per 9 in 2021, 2022 AAA before the promotion, 10.2K per 9. Then he came up and was a K per inning, brief period of time, of course, because he got hurt. However, he's a control guy. The whip sub 1.12 on the pro career. Love it. Then you go ahead and say, well, what about the Ks? Was it crazy? Was it insane? Well, in 2021, he had 111 innings pitched, 130 Ks. Not crazy by any stretch, right? 10 and a half per, but that's great overall. It's just that people want to see stupid ridiculous when you're talking about a potential ace. One of the best things that happened to Max Meyer was the injury now when he first came up and will still be a rookie because, well, I guess I should say for dynasty owners, probably not ideal for him, but he's going to be able to come back and work a lot more on the control and let the fastball come to him over the 2024-2025 season and then really hone in. And in the meantime, you can go around collecting shares of him in your various leagues that mean a lot to you because I think he's going to mean a lot to the Marlins in the future. And Sixto Sanchez aside, they do have a good track record of being able to develop starters. And I think we're about to see the next wave of the Marlins starters come through. And it could end up including Sanchez as well. But we know a couple guys that are kind of on the cusp ready to go. Anyway, Meyer's my number 10.
Yep. No, I like Meyer. We skipped over him earlier. I think, one of those guys, college arm as well, that just, sped through that system, right? I've talked about this a lot. Like these guys get rocketed through systems almost always have some sort of issue, right? What I like about Max Meyer is that he had the issue before he really broke through into the pros. So I like his ability to just have a clean start when he comes back. He's not going to face any of that, like I got there and failed, the bull crap that derails so many careers. But I still like it for all the reasons you listed. I like it because he's going to enter as like SP5, even though he has SP2, SP1 upside, right? Like he's going to enter the back of that rotation because it's so good and have almost no pressure, right? And that's a good situation for a young arm to be thrust in. And you look at other guys, there's only a handful of Manoahs out there that just walk in and don't feel pressure, right? They're not a lot of those guys out there that can do that. So I'm with you there on that one. For me, coming in at 9, you've got him at 3, Robbie, and that's Spencer Strider. Strikeouts to the moon, right? This almost unsustainable, right? Like that's for me, that's the big concern.
Oh, it is. The guy's like 6 foot 180, Ty. It's not sustainable. That's why he's not number 1 for me. Is that so? And it sounds silly to be like defending the number 3 ranking. Like, why is your 3 like same for you? Why is your 9 not number 1 based on what happened last year? That was a lot of things going right. A lot of major league teams are going to be ready for the Spencer Strider 2023 version of him that comes out. So I like him. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off with it. I just wanted to say my piece is that I think we're going to see some regression, but I don't think we're going to see regression to the point that he's not still a very valuable Atlanta Brave for several years moving forward.
Well, and I didn't get a chance to watch enough of him in the spring that I would have liked to do, but I would have liked to see how much he was throwing the changeup, because the fastball is far and away his best pitch. He threw the slider pretty well last year, right? So it makes sense. Fastball, elite, sliders, pretty dang good, if not elite.
Everybody's off kilter.
Yeah. So, but the like you're saying, like if you look at even his heat map, like if you're just looking fastball, you see the spinner and you just lay off and you tip your cap if he strikes you out. Like that's the adjustment, because you're only looking for two things: fastball in and up, slider down and away. And again, we talked about that earlier with Hunter Brown. Kind of the same mentality here. Now, the difference is we did see about 5% changeups. I'd like to see that in the 10 range for Strider here. If we get to that number, like if we see that 10% of his pitches being a changeup, the upside for sure could be very, very strong here. So I like it, but I have him at 9 for those reasons. I don't know that he's going to throw it 10% of the time. And I think that's going to blow up the ERA. I think it's going to add the walk totals. Strikeouts are going to be there, and he's going to be kind of in Dylan Cease territory, where he's great, but maybe not like the guy everyone talks about as being the best guy on their rotation.
Yeah, I think the big thing with him that I saw was just the fact that, like, at the size he is, it's going to be hard to to be like a perennial ace to the level that people are already anointing him. Plus, not to discredit previous claims about Ian Anderson, we've seen Atlanta come up and have a guy who's been really good for a brief period of time and then, lose it, or however you want to say, have an issue that they haven't been able to recover from yet. Not to say that Strider is going to do that, but a sophomore slump, name your cliche, could come his way this year. And like you said, Ty, if they just lay off the spinner and make him throw it in the strike zone, we could see a very different result, especially early in the season, because that could be the thing out of camp, right? Just sit on the fastball. Just sit. We know there are coaches out there who still do it. They just tell the guy, like, you sit on the fastball, let the rest go by, and then it's up to the hitter to be disciplined. So, but one thing I will say about my number 9 guy, there's no way you can be disciplined. This mofo just going to get you out. That is just recently, or will recently no longer be a teenager, but already pitching at AA, Ricky Tiedemann with Toronto. Yes, this is the fantasy hotshot that everybody's excited about. There's 3 of these guys left to mention. Well, here's one of them. 13.4 K per 9 last year. Holy hell, we love it. Decimal 8.6 whip. Yes, we love it. Was pretty good on the strikeout totals for last year, considering he only pitched 78 innings to have 117. I don't want to see him in the bigs. We talked about him on the starting pitcher episode when we got into the 5-year dynasty rankings. The big thing that I really liked about him, Ty, he only gave up 3 home runs. Nobody can hit him. But what he does do that's a bit of an issue is he puts guys on base. He's got 29 walks in those 78 and 2/3 innings. He's going to need to manage that a little bit better as he gets higher up. To your point about Strider, if guys just sit and make him throw strikes, maybe we'll see him need to just come into the zone more, and all of a sudden the strikeouts go down. But if he gets the inning count up, it's one of those, like, what's the worst case scenario here for Tiedemann? And I think it's legit starter, a guy that's 6'4", 220 lefty. And he's 20 years old. Like, man. I'll take it. Like a lot of people, I think from his draft year, it was a 3rd round pick in 2021. A lot of people that didn't jump the gun on him then are now like, oh, wow, I need to find the next one in next year's draft. Well, they don't come along very often, right? He's one of 3 guys who have really jumped up ranks the last 18 months on the pitching side. Ride the wave if you got him. I certainly wouldn't trade him, but I don't know that you want to pay the price to try to get him on your roster.
Yeah, like for me, like my concern is the fastball is great. The command on the other pitches is my concern. And all the clips that I've watched of him in the very brief spring outings that he's had, like the command on off speed and breaking pitches is a concern, right? Like it just is. And so that he's 20, like you expect that from a 20-year-old, right? And I think some people are going to buy really early. They're going to run out of runway on contract time and other things and all that fun stuff. Or they're not going to have a competitive team by the time he's good. But anyway, point is he's going to be good. It's just how good, I think, is the question. for Ricky Tiedemann.
Mhm.
So I think that's as simple as we can put that one. Both of us have this guy at 8. Makes it really easy. Yuri Perez in that stacked Marlins rotation. Like, we just keep mentioning Marlins here. There's a reason for that. That rotation is filthy for the foreseeable future. And Yuri Perez, and this is going to be tough for you, Robbie, as an Alcantara homer. He might be the best of the group, right? Of the entire group, possibly, right? There's no guarantee on that, but it's very possible.
I would say so. Build is a big thing here, right? 6'8", 220. He's big. He's still thin though. He's still thin at 6'8" at 220. He's still thin. Sandy Alcantara, similar build, obviously thrown from the right side, Perez from the left. Let's do the slow play on Perez's ceiling. Everybody's getting excited that he's going to be an ace out of the pocket. Don't forget that Randy Johnson struggled for 4 full MLB seasons before he was able to get together. I think I mentioned that on a very recent podcast here. Same thing could be with Yuri Perez. Get him. Ideally, you're not going to pay through the nose for it. Otherwise, let him come up, let him struggle, then pick him up. Because I think the longevity here, I think the longevity is here with him. Whereas with Ricky Tiedemann, it could be a little more consistent throughout. The ceiling is 100%. As Perez could be the best guy on this list over the course of the next 10 years, but things need to fall right for that to happen. Like, he's going to need to be able to consistently get guys out. His K per 9 wasn't as dominant. Tiedemann was a little bit better for comparing the two guys because they're within a year of each other. But the other thing too is that Yuri Perez was a J2 guy who nobody cared about when he signed 3 years ago, I think it was, who was just like free money in drafts 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, everybody caught up to him last year. So now we're all watching him. What's he going to do when he hits AAA? And is there going to be any bit of a recoil with him? I think there will be. And I think that's when we can all pounce on him in dynasty leagues, knowing that he can continue to move forward. We've talked about big old John Roush before. This isn't John Roush. This is far more of a Randy Johnson type athletic approach pitcher. And I know Randy Johnson's a Hall of Famer. It's a hard and a poor guy to comp him with, but it's more about the slow build, letting Yuri Perez become who he is. And Sandy Alcantara did the exact same thing with the same organization 4 years ago, whenever that trade was made. I want to see the same thing with Perez, but right now the price is so high. If you don't have him already, there's no point in paying the price. Wait until you start to see that struggle. But absolutely consider him a top 10 starting pitcher that you should be looking at for your dynasty leagues.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on all that. I think if we, look into the future, like 6'8" guys tend to be scary, right? Like, there's only a handful of guys that go pro. This is a very polished 19-year-old 6'8", right? Like, that's the thing that's scary, and we're going to talk about another guy that's kind of very similar in that category, but that's
right. I've got to correct myself before you go on. My apologies. I wrecked your transition. Now we're even for the Ian Anderson transition. Perez is thrown from the right side. I said left side. My apologies.
Well, and I mean, either way, like the 6'8" is a big thing. Nobody cares what side because the side is up. He's coming
right.
From up.
It's coming straight down. Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to, because I know someone's going to eat me alive for that if I don't. It'll be Ronnie. It'll be friggin' Ronnie.
Yeah, because Ronnie owns them everywhere. Yeah, Ronnie has all of his posters and cards, and like he's Ronnie's Topanga, right?
Oh wow, Topanga.
Yeah,
that's great. I hope people get that out there at Dinger's Pod, and just say Topanga or give us a GIF. Boy Meets World if you get that. All right,
that's right. Yep. So Ricky Tiedemann was my 7, Robbie. So I'm going to jump ahead to 6, where we had some agreement once again. Christian Javier is a guy that, if you're a longtime listener, I told you, you should have owned him at cheap. If you want him now, you're going to pay for it. This is a guy that had elite stuff. It was obvious this breakout was going to happen. Congrats to those of you that listen to me, and sucker to Rob because I own him everywhere and he couldn't.
Yeah, it wasn't possible for me to go pick him up. I just had to listen, and I'm like, well, Ty's already got him, so I'll hope for is that this doesn't go well. But my goodness, Patrick Sandoval.
Yeah, right.
Although
Well,
he's
you know
not
what?
on this list, of course. But
Yeah, Sandoval's, on his way to maybe be the left-handed version here. So, like, it is there. But I think everyone knows where Javier is. Like, I think the stuff's there. And I think there's still room for improvement, which is the scary part, is that his improvement is going to be getting deeper into games. And we
Yeah.
saw at moments last year, he was legitimately, and for an entire game, unhittable, right? And that's just how good his stuff is. With a little bit more improvement, we might have an ace here in the hole. So that's my 6, Robbie. Who do you have jumping ahead next up on your list?
I'm up to my number 5, which is Grayson Rodriguez. I'm going to skip my 7. That's your 1. So number 5, Grayson Rodriguez with Baltimore. The only thing I want to say about Javier is this is like a guy who had 25 starts last year and only 148 and 2/3 innings. So to your point, Ty, it's all about getting that extra inning each start this year. Make him a quality start machine. I'm sure that's the game plan already with Houston. So it's just going to be one of those things to see come together. Tight pitcher right there with him. Moving on to a potential ace here in Grayson Rodriguez. Will he make the opening day roster? By the time you're listening to this, maybe it's been announced that he is or is not. At this point in time, I don't care as much about April as I do the next 10 years with Grayson Rodriguez. To me, this is like a fit and finished, polished pitcher who is in a park that's now going to benefit him a little bit more, especially when it's cold, and the fact that they got the balanced schedule. He's not going to get the piss beaten out of him by the patient Red Sox that they're building. And, Yoshida looks like he might be a guy here, Ty, after watching this World Baseball Classic. I know it's not all against the high-end starters over and over again, but the Red Sox look like they might have themselves a guy here with Yoshida in the outfield. They need it. But anyway, to Rodriguez, this is just like a legit dude, and I'm excited for him. I've got him in our big money auction league. This is someone that I want to see get 20 starts this year, and then I want to see 32 every year after this. Just put that guy in there and let him go. As Baltimore gets better, Rodriguez should become the ace of that staff. And if DL Hall or anybody else wants to join, cool beans, man. There's a guy who's 20 years old right now, I think he is, with Baltimore, who I'd love to talk about in some kind of deep dive episode we do early in the season. But in the meantime, it's Grayson Rodriguez with Baltimore. He's turning the page. He's the second highest rated AL East starter I've got. There we go. That is a detail.
Nice. Yeah, I know, and he's my 3, Robbie. Like I like him a lot. I've liked him a lot for a while. And
do you have him in the home league?
I do.
Is he your pitcher?
No, I did. I traded him.
Okay.
I traded him last season. He was one of my draft and hold guys. I swapped him out for Josh Jung, which is going to play well for me.
Okay.
I'm happy with that maneuver. But the next guy on my list at 5 here is George Kirby. You have him at number 2, Robbie. George Kirby is excellent. There's no arguments there. For me, he falls into the category of I don't think he's a big enough asshole to be an ace. Like he just seems like the kid that got beat up between classes, and that's the big knock I have on him. Like the stuff's there. I want him to be fiery. Like I want my ace to walk out on that mound and be the guy. And I don't want him to have even a moment of doubt. And that's all I watch when I see him pitch is I can't unsee that part of him. And the stuff is more than good enough to be elite ace stuff. So it's just that piece for me, that little something extra that I'm stuck on.
Yeah, I love me some George Kirby. I feel like last year at AAA when he went, I think he had a half dozen starts, just murdered Double A. And then I think had like 1 or 2 in AAA, and then they're like, yeah, get up here. And 25 starts later, but to the comment about Christian Javier having 25 starts on 148 and 2/3 innings, they were managing the innings a little bit more on George Kirby. He had 130 for a total of 156 and 2/3 last year. So he did in total pitch more, But this is going to be the year where we should see 180 MLB innings from George Kirby and like some legit numbers. Like we could be knocking on the door of 200 Ks if it ticks up back to his minor league days of 10.6. And I like it. I think George Kirby on a really good Seattle team is just going to work for us long term here.
So, like, he's obviously young enough that these things aren't things to get lost on, but he's 25. His exit velocity and hard hit rates were not good last year, and he gave up 13 home runs in 130 innings, right? So almost a home run a game, right? So those are some red flags, right? Those are things that we need to see improvement on. Now, it's his first real long stretch of innings, right? They capped him out. They basically shut him down. So there's room for improvement. He's a 5-pitch guy. There's enough here to stay on him. But like that's a just so you know kind of comment, right? And it's the big, thing I'm going to be watching this season, Robbie, because the batting average against some of his secondary pitches isn't good, right? Like what would you guess if you had to say slider? What was the batting average against his slider last season?
Well, I would say, because I thought he was pretty solid, and at 6'4", he's going to be intimidating, like 180.
Yeah, 283.
Okay, so he was very easy to hit on the slider versus the rest.
Yeah, the fastball is 221, curveball's 305, the cutter 362, sinker was 266, and the changeup was 279. So I will say this: the expected batting average against all of those pitches was better, with the exception of the curveball, which was higher at 319. So there's definitely room for a regression to the mean in a good way here. And that's going to bode well for George Kirby. He's still young enough, like I'm saying, but the hard contact rate for me is the big concern here. And it's the thing if you're a George Kirby owner, you're going to want to watch, but could blow through it all, could kind of become that, living in Seattle and having to deal with all the nonsense on the streets of Seattle or San Francisco. That's going on out there, or Portland, I guess, but there's no.
Well, he is an East Coast guy, right? He's New York. He was drafted by the Mets in the 32nd round of 2016 draft, and then didn't take it. So I wonder if that was one of those, like we talked about before with Rowdy Tellez, where if they didn't sign somebody earlier on, they would have had the money to try to pay Kirby to go pro right away. Like not necessarily the hometown kid. I don't know where Rye is, the town or city of Rye in New York, but to be drafted by the Mets was probably pretty cool. And then he goes out on the West Coast now. So I would assume he's tough and probably has a fun accent.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I'm just a little concerned. I don't actually own him anywhere, Robbie. So I'm just a little shy on this one, even though I believe in the upside. I really do. Next guy here on my list, Robbie. Did we cover your 5, or is it on your 5?
Say who's up for you?
No, you had Grayson at 5. So my 4 is your number 1, and I'm actually shocked this was your number 1, even though I love this guy. Yeah, I do.
Explain it.
Yeah, please. I'm just not sure he's better than the couple guys I have ahead of him on the list. I have 3 guys ahead of him, and that's Alek Manoah. I love Alek Manoah as much as anybody. He's the opposite of what we just described for George Kirby. Like if we're in a street fight, my first phone call is Alek Manoah. Right? Like he's the pit bull guy that I want with taking the ball in a big moment. And the slider's elite. The fastball 2-seamer is elite. The changeup is elite, but they don't throw it for some weird reason. And I just really, really like everything about Alek Manoah. He's a big gamer. And even when he doesn't have his best stuff, still manages to get through 6 innings. Right. And they talk about it all the time on the Jays broadcast. Like he had a really brutal start, and somehow here we are in the 6th inning and he's at 87 pitches. Right. So he just has that ability to get through games, which is a huge, huge, huge thing for an ace.
So you just described in the way you described Manoah, you brought up 2 of the pitchers, which were the reason that I based him as my number 1 on the list of 25 and under starting pitchers, because he will be 25 this year. That's how he'll be playing this year. What is his exact age right now? I just wanted to make sure I get this here. He is right now 25, and he's been 25 for 2 months and change. So Alek Manoah is very much like Mark Burley keeps the pitch count low, gets into games, can struggle when he's not doing his best. He's also very much like David Wells, a bulldog. He's 285 pounds and he's 6'6". That's a beast of a boy. And as a pro, like in his 308 innings, 308 innings, he's been great. He's not the K per 9 guy, which is what I think probably throws people on him. For your fantasy thing, he's not getting you 220 right now. But what he is doing is he's getting wins on a very competitive Toronto team. Quality starts are there for him. He's being competitive when you might think he's not. The whip is outstanding last year, 0.992. Holy crap. Like, there are categories that he's more than making up for the fact that his K per 9 is not 10, and I love him moving forward because Toronto is locked in veterans, right? They've got a Barrios who is older. They've got Gosman who's older, Bassett who's old, and Ty, who's the other that I'm forgetting? That's Kikuchi, who's got 2 years left. Yeah. Manoah has the most talent of all of those guys, and he's going to get to lead the staff in talent while not actually needing to be a leader, which I think puts him in an elite position for years to come, where he's going to get to just be the best guy without having to actually like stand up in the dressing room and do all those, or clubhouse, and do all those, rah things. I think he's just going to get to be an elite talent and continue to be a fantasy bulldog. I love him for it. I love the consistency. I think he's got by far the highest floor in this group. And like, there are guys who might have better outputs. Like my number 4 guy might have a higher output total, even if you say over the next decade. But at the same time, I think Manoah is not going to have that drop off where all of a sudden he's got like a 5. He's not going to Giolito us. Yeah. Unless, of course, he just gets fat.
And I've got nothing against Alek Manoah. I think higher of the other guys. That's it. It's that simple. And I think one of the guys is a bulldog as well. The other one's too young to know. But I just think he has the most talent of anybody on this list. And that's my number 2 guy, Andrew Painter. And I know everybody just ran to the hills. Arm injury, 20-year-old, big tall righty, high school arm. His career's over. Right? Guess what? No, like, now I'm buying everywhere and anywhere I can find him because, he's polished, right? And this is something that most people in the fantasy world don't have the ability to analyze, is they don't have the ability to sit here and say, okay, he was injured, or he had this, pushback, or, hurdle that he had to get through in his career, or he had to add another pitch or whatever. People don't look through that stuff when you're talking trades. They go, okay, I see he's pitched this many innings and strikeouts. They've watched exactly 0 video, and they don't know what they're talking about. Andrew Painter has all the right things, and it has huge ace upside, and he's really polished for a big guy. So for me, like, him and Yuri Perez aren't that far apart in terms of their upside, but I think Painter's floor is much higher than Perez. That's the separator for me. And I think Painter just is going to be the ace in Philly, assuming, there's not a bigger injury behind this. But Dombrowski's already said they fully expect him to pitch innings for the Philadelphia Phillies this season, even after the injury. So that gives me a ton of faith that whatever he's going through isn't a big deal.
Like, I love Mick Abel, but he didn't make it as high as Painter did for me. I've got him at 16. The comparable for me with the group of 3 dudes is Perez, Tiedemann, and Painter. Those are the 3 kind of young bucks that are all being the future of, fantasy rosters, and they're all great targets for sure. To me, Painter and Tiedemann had very similar minor leagues, 3 levels last year, finished at AA. K per 9 was similar for these guys. I guess I prefer Tiedemann probably just because I've watched more of him, and the 6'7" frame of Painter scares me a little bit more, which is why he's further back. But also, you're saying Dombrowski's saying he's going to pitch for him this year. I don't believe there's going to be a lot of Painter in this. Is like we're taking like very little of that injury into account for the ranking here. I think there's going to be very little Painter 2023, 2024. I can see Tiedemann coming in the day he does, like Manoah, and just having a rotation spot and continuing it. I'm not quite sure what we're going to see with Painter. And that's where part of this comes for me, where he's further back. Not that I think the talent's not there. It is there. Absolutely, it's there. But how are we going to see that transition? I just don't know if it'll be as smooth. Again, big frame guy, very much like Yuri Perez. I'm just, I guess, preferring the safety, if we want to call it, of a Perez and Tiedemann versus seeing Painter as possibly having, knowing that somebody might have an arm issue now that could be 18, mean that their career can't progress for 18 months, could be a bit of a problem for me. So that's why he's back in the teens for me.
I get it. Like, and I mean, the injury scare is obviously an issue. Him and Meyer fit that, for obvious reasons. Espino fits that category just a little bit as well. But if you look at all those guys, Painter just has the highest upside. And I would bet on that to be the best guy out of that group on the backside of this. So number 2, Robbie, you had George Kirby, who we've already covered. Number 3 was Spencer Strider, just a recoil for you on that one. And number 1 for you was Alek Manoah, which we already covered. My number 1 to bring it home, and a guy we haven't talked about yet, my best stuff in baseball guy, Dustin May. And I feel very strongly about this one. Wild wipeout stuff. And we haven't seen enough of Dustin May to really appreciate just how much upside's here. And, he's got Alek Manoah stuff with like 3 or 4 extra mile an hour on all his pitches, right? So he's got movement. He's got the sharpness that Alek Manoah has, but he's got extra velocity. And, his first season didn't quite have all the command. It's still dominated. Then, last season coming back, he had moments of brilliance, but didn't have the command all the way back. This year, in the spring, he's looked good. I fully expect him to be in a conversation at some moment in the season where he's in the Cy Young conversation. That's how good Dustin May is. Now, can he sustain it for a full season coming off an injury? I don't know. But if we're talking dynasty arms for the foreseeable future, I love this arm more than any other arm in baseball. I'm keeping him in our home league, Robbie. I traded for him. I'm cutting Logan Webb to keep Dustin May, right? So like that's the level of upside I have here, even though obviously Webb is a safe keep. Dustin May just is that good to me. And there's very few guys with the movement profiles that he has.
Yeah, I think Dustin May's fine. All right. I got him ranked 7. He's not my number 1, but I'm not. Yeah, he's fine. I'm not the most excited for him because he's like prospect fatigued for me. Plus, I've had to listen to you go on and on and on.
Hello, is it me you're looking for?
But someone that we've never talked about on this podcast is my number 4 guy, Tristan McKenzie with Cleveland.
Oh, yeah. We totally forgot about him.
Oops. Yeah, you just missed him. I did not forget about Tristan
I did
McKenzie.
that completely accidentally, even though for the long-time listeners that might have seemed completely intentional.
Yeah, that you just didn't want to talk about him. So talk about home run problems, and that's where Tristan McKenzie starts and ends as far as issues go. He gave up 25 last year. That's not good. Mm-hmm. You don't want to do that. But he did pitch 191 in a third innings in 30 games. This is a guy in your points league who is a beast. He can consistently put up 30 plus points per game when he's not giving up those bombs. And last year, what did he have? 11 wins. Is that right? Yeah. 11-11. And he's still a beast because the ERA is sub 3, 296 last year. Look for something in the range of that, give or take, say 30 points. And the whip sub 1.95. I love him. You know what, Ty? I didn't keep him in our home league. I didn't even consider it. And one of the reasons was that my keepers were just too damn good. And I thought, I'm picking third because a lot of things did not break right for me this year. Maybe I will want to go with McKenzie to give myself another pitcher, but I needed to see who was left. It might be too damn high to pick him in the first round. And I don't disagree with it, but he is my number 4 guy. and I don't know who else is going to be kept. It's like the Yahoo app sucks. Get the thing, get the home league on Fantrax so that I can see who's in the player pool, so that I can
The
actually have a
player
look.
pool's
and
already
do-
set.
It's
Relax.
not
If you just
on
go
the
in-
app. It's not there. All right. So
well,
Yahoo,
learn how to use a browser.
Yahoo, yeah, app sucks. I got to use my computer to get ready for the draft. And on Fantrax, it's just boom, you lock your guys in, and it's there. We're not sponsored by Fantrax, but boy, would we like to be the podcast
It is-
that
it is
replaces
really-
the tool shed.
It is really funny though. For me, the reality of app development is funny because that's partly what I do for my daytime. And the number of people like apps are great, but this is a perfect example of why you build a browser side app, because then you don't have to worry about disconnects between your browser app and your phone app. Like it's bad practice, and this is exactly it. So, that's the one thing we'll agree on Yahoo. The rest of it does fine in season. It is just this moment where you get really angry every year,
Because I can't see my players.
Yeah, you just got to use your browser, or view it on browser mode from the browser on your phone.
But then I got to
ways
remember my
around it.
password. There's a
Yep.
whole bunch of information. Anyway,
sounds like a you problem.
Absolutely it is. Well, this dissolved just as much as most pitchers' arms do over the course of their first 5 years as pros. Ty, I think we did a good service tonight. This idea came to us through a Twitter conversation that I was participating in, and the question was thrown out there. What kind of podcasts, dynasty topics are not talked about often enough? And one of them was top 25 players under 25. And I said to you, I love that idea. There were some other ones that were mentioned in there. And I thought, well, we've got some good things to talk about. I've screenshotted the bulk of that conversation because I just think it is relevant stuff to go over during the season as well. Because as we know, as soon as we hit the dog days of summer, that's when people start to turn their attention to football because they've ruined their fantasy baseball season. And that's when the sharks like us can really take advantage and start to pick up some valuable players. So we've covered the pitchers. The hitter pool is much deeper. My God. Oh my God. It's so deep. I think there's like 500 names that I drew. Pardon?
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. So I don't know how we're going to whittle it down, but that's on tap for us to cover shortly. And then maybe we don't really need to do a collective because you'll just know kind of the top 50 from that point. We don't like to be like everybody else where they have 5 pitchers in their first 50 rankings just because someone might get hurt. Those same pitchers are the ones who are winning you your league year in and year out.
That's right. So fun fact, just to wrap it up here on spring training stats, Robbie, Nolan Jones played tonight without, like, in the late game after being optioned. So fun fact on that one.
Was he crying like Wilmer Flores that year he got traded from the Mets and then realized he wasn't? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, to be 100% honest with you.
So I guess sometimes they bring those guys up, right? So maybe he was still kicking around. So grab a jersey.
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if I mentioned this guy in the previous wrap-ups, but Heston Kjerstad's hitting 390 in the spring.
No,
and has had some really, really strong at-bats. He's not going to break that Orioles squad, but I've said this before, maybe not in the spring training metric stats, but just that I fully expect we're going to see him at some point this year, and I'll anchor in on that. Chris Sale was pitching quite well through the spring, got ripped today by those Orioles. That's irrelevant. We saw yesterday Greinke tried to pick 10 guys off yesterday, threw over 10 times, and had a great, like, all-time quote after the game, saying how this is what spring training is for. I intentionally let guys get on base so that I could try to pick them off. Just elite Greinke comment.
Oh,
yeah. And the other thing, the last piece I'm going to bring home, and I'm not going to go in deep into the stats tonight, but the last point that I'll have to bring us home, a guy that people have just forgotten about how good he can be. Riley Green in Detroit's having a good spring, and I fully expect him to make a lot of noise now that they're going to move him out of center field. Or at least they should be moving him out of center field. They might still try it, but I fully expect Riley Green have a huge bounce back here and start to be the face of the franchise that he can be.
So my final point here, it's a roundabout, fun, exciting thing. Tommy Henry of the Diamondbacks was vying for a spot. Brutal Control got optioned, but he was second, I think, in spring training strikeouts, next to Garrett Cole, who was number 1. And you know who else was in that top 5 or is in that top 5 for spring training strikeouts? That's right, everybody. Number 45 in your programs, number 1 in your heart, Brent Honeywell Jr. 21 Ks and 15 innings pitched. Let's not talk about the 1.53 whip. Let's not talk about the 7.8 ERA. Spring training stats can be ignored unless you like them.
Absolutely.
It's just kind of neat that San Diego's throwing him out there a lot. That's all I'm interested in.
Agreed. Yeah, I find it interesting
they
as well.
Plans.
He might be a sacrificial lamb for April, but that's very plausible.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. And we'll continue to talk about Brent Honeywell for exactly no more time. That's a great spot to leave it. It's been Tyler Robb here on Dingers.